Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this, which is I believe, the 24th Firestarter Forum, which means we've been doing these for the best part of 2 years now. So another exciting topic today, slightly technical topic, perhaps, but one that has been driven out of some demand from actually people coming on these forums. So ESG, or Environmental, Social and Governance, to give it its full title. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Originally, as you know, the title of this session was ESG to SMEs, but I thought I would give it its full title, just so nobody's confused as to what we're talking about. So that is what we're going to cover today, and really just getting to a point where we get a bit of an understanding as to what this is all about and what you need to know. So as usual, we'll start just by explaining the plan for the next 75 minutes and also just giving a little bit of guidance on how these sessions work. So I'm going to set it up. We're going to do some quick polls. We're delighted to be joined by Dr Sophie Taysom today, who is our resident expert on this topic. So she will share some pearls of wisdom and really get us into a place where we're starting to understand quite a lot more about this topic. We'll then move into some breakouts, talk a little bit about our plans for the coming months, and then Dave Harries is going to host a panel discussion, a general discussion to find out what was going on in the breakouts and what people's evolving thoughts on this are. So a fun-packed 75 minutes. So without further ado, just to remind people on Zoom, everybody would have been brought on video and mute. The best view is the speaker view. You get the full screen and the full presentation and see all the key speakers at relevant moments. Breakouts, you don't need to do anything. We'll manage that for you. Although when you get there, obviously it helps generally if you're unmuted. When we're in the open forum, we will bring people up onto screen at the relevant points. The chat window is there. Send questions, thoughts to the open group, or specifically to Matt Wheeler, who will be monitoring this as we go through. So let's get going. And as always, my role in this is just to perhaps open it up a little bit, provoke a little bit of thought ahead of introducing our guest speaker and the polls. So I guess it's an interesting topic, this environmental, social and governance, and particularly understanding how is it relevant to smaller and medium-sized businesses. And I suppose if anybody, or if everybody is like me, you're a little bit unsure as to how this actually works and is relevant to you. So probably just a little bit confused, and in the context of lots of other things that we've talked about, it feels like maybe it's just another thing to worry about. So if those of you who are forum regulars, we've talked about lots of things regarding sustainability agendas, mental health. We've talked about B Corp as a concept. We've talked about CSR, corporate and social responsibility, as a concept. So actually, understanding how ESG fits into this is indeed another thing that we have to ask ourselves. What do I do with this? So I guess, is it just another way of talking about some of the same things, or is it something else? Do I, as a business owner, a business leader, need to worry about this? And more importantly, what are the consequences of not worrying about it? So I think the good news is a lot of people are doing some really positive things already relating to this, either deliberately or potentially accidentally. So what I'm really hoping we're going to achieve as we go through this session today is just getting a clear understanding of what we actually need to do. So here at Firestarter, I always give credit where credit is due. I was introduced to this concept by Mr. Craig Wiltshire, who I saw there. He's on the forum. This concept of the messy middle. I think at Firestarter, we always love a plan. We always love a bit of clarity. We always love identifying some practical steps that get stuff done and move out of this place where we're in this kind of messy middle of misunderstanding as to what's actually happening and can move forward. So hopefully today's session will really help you with that and get you to a place where you understand what you need to do about ESG. So let's get started. What we're going to do is we will start with some simple polls just to take the temperature of the room. So any second now, hopefully the first of 3 polls will appear on your screen. The question, these are all really simple questions, just really to understand where you are with this concept. So how would you describe your current awareness levels of ESG? It starts from not at all aware to quite aware, but I'd like to know more, to very aware. I'm looking forward to some great discussion. So if you could just pick one of those. And in a second, we shall show the results. So I'll just give you a little bit of time. And then in a second, the results will come up on the screen. Okay. And well, I think probably not hugely surprisingly, no one is, possibly Sophie would like to think, no one is positioning themselves as an expert on this. So not at all aware and quite aware, 50-50 split. So let's go to the next poll, similar type of question. Coming up on your screen now, hopefully. Okay, how important is ESG in your business currently? And same range of options really. Not at all important. We haven't given it any focus yet. Quite important. We're dedicating some time to it. Or very important. It's central to our strategy and values. So let's just understand where this is. I feel I should sing during this bit, but I'm not going to. I don't think the world's ready. Okay, results are going to come up on your screen any second now, and let's just see where this one has got us to. Okay, so at the moment, the kind of, I guess, the perception is that more than 50% of people are saying it's not at all important. They haven't given it any focus yet. I guess that doesn't mean that by the end of this session you're going to look at this from a different angle, but at the moment, I guess it's something that, and I have to say, at the moment, I would be in that same bracket. And then finally, let's do the third poll. So that will be coming up on your screen presently. Okay, so and finally, this is, I guess, how advanced are you with this? So how advanced is your business in taking ESG focused action? So not at all, we haven't done anything. I know which one we'll be in. Quite advanced, we are engaged and thinking about our actions, and very advanced, we're dedicating significant resources and taking lots of actions. Okay, results coming up on the screen now, and I think in an absolute record, I think that's the biggest vote we've ever had in one category. So I think it's safe to say that Sophie can only really help us today by informing us as to what we are not knowing and not doing at the moment. So okay, so that's all very good stuff. So thank you very much for that. It certainly sets the level of understanding. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background and introduce you to Sophie. So Sophie is the director and founder of Keyah Consulting. She's a multidisciplinary expert whose career spans central government, business and academia. Her work focuses on ESG in real estate and health and the built environment, where she works with clients to define a clear ESG position aligned with their strategy, identify strengths and weaknesses, and develop a baseline on which to build. So I think we are going to be in excellent hands today. She also brings this expertise to a range of other roles, including being a member of the Institution of Engineering and Technology, a trustee for Groundwork London, and a member of Urban Health Council, amongst many other things. So I'm really pleased that Sophie is here today. So we'd like to bring Sophie up on the screen now. So hi, Sophie. Thank you very much for doing this today. As you can tell, I think we're in novice territory here on this topic. So without further ado, let you talk us through and enlighten us over the next 15 minutes. So over to you, Sophie.
Thank you. And thank you for that fantastic introduction. Okay, so today I'm just going to be touching on some of the issues to do with ESG for SMEs. So it's really giving a sense of what is ESG and why now. Very much what is the UK context, so what are all the factors that need to be considered, and also some pointers on where to start. And finally, I provide some free resources that you can go to, and things like carbon capture and those sorts of things that might be helpful. So first up is ESG. What's all this stuff mean? So we're talking about a whole range of issues dealing with business. So on the environmental side, we're talking about issues like climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, biodiversity, the impact on business of extreme weather events, and then it's getting down into the nuts and bolts around things like energy efficiency and water and material wastage. Under the kind of in the social bucket, I like to think of it in sort of an inside and outside set of views. So the internal, it's really about how we run as a business. What are our HR views? What are we doing around diversity and inclusion, staff engagement, those sorts of things? Looking outwards, it's very much about how we act and perform as a good corporate and community citizen. So what are we giving back? How are we contributing things like social value to our local communities, for instance? And around governance, there are really two sort of key pillars here. There's something about how we run as a business. So, paying our tax, and we've got the appropriate governance structures and risk management and financial management procedures. There is also something about how we govern ESG. So the point of ESG is really to embed it right across the organization. So it effectively becomes part of the company's DNA. So why start now? So next slide, please. Yes. So see, over the last has happened. A lot of what's been going in the ESG, it's been around for a while, but over the last couple of years, obviously we've had the impact of COVID. With that, there's been really an increased emphasis on social value in particular. So how do we revitalize our communities, leveling up in general, those sorts of things? With the Black Lives Matter movement, we've also seen a huge increase in the level of interest in diversity and inclusion, particularly senior levels. That's really at board and kind of senior exec levels. So for instance, the Financial Conduct Authority recently ran a consultation on whether or not very large companies, so listed companies, for instance, need to level of diversity at board and senior exec level. And of course, over the last couple of years, we've seen really a huge increase in the number of extreme weather events. This has been anything from floods and fires. Last year, you might have come across the IPCC report, so Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which kind of said, actually, we really need to take an urgent action now. So next slide, please. So really, why now? So there's a huge amount going on here. There are really very strongly growing expectations amongst consumers, from lenders, from investors. So it's really about shifting views towards brand and reputation and changing consumer expectations, which I'll touch on a little more. Also, in terms of workforce, increasingly people are conscious of the companies they're working with and for, and whether or not their values are aligned. So, for instance, I read a piece last year, the gas and oil industry is now having problems of attracting the brightest and the best. And this is the first time this has ever happened. In terms of clearly the direction of travel. So if you think about sort of ethical investing, all of these sorts of things, if you think about direction that a lot of banks and investors are through, so that's really looking at things like sustainability-linked loans, for instance, which a number of banks are now putting forward. And also there are real opportunity for potential cost savings and efficiencies. So what about the UK context? Sorry if we can. I'm looking. Fantastic. So in terms of the UK context, the UK was the first major economy to commit to net zero by 2050. And this is a huge, it's difficult to really underestimate just how big an issue this is. So, and we've also seen a huge surge in the green pound. Certainly in the UK, what we've seen, so in 2020, we're looking at household spending over £2,000 a year with a real focus on green and ethical spending. And many of you might have made changes and decisions about how you're spending your money. So for me recently, I've moved away from Amazon Prime. I've also moved away from Spotify. And I'm not unique in doing that. There's also something about social and environmental considerations are becoming increasingly important in public procurement. So if you're involved in bids, for instance, with for major government projects or with the NHS, a proportion of bids will now be decided on social value and environmental considerations. So ESG is no longer niche, it's actually need to have. The other thing to really take note of is the regulatory landscape is changing incredibly quickly in this space. So from April of this year, very large companies and many listed companies will need to start reporting on effectively resilience associated with climate change and also the impact to net zero. Where this will have a big impact is particularly in the context of supply chains, because large companies are not only being looked at for their immediate actions, but also those actions and activities throughout their supply chains. And this is what happened, you know, these are the sorts of issues which are becoming very real and very tangible. So reputation counts. So that could be social reputation, environmental reputation. For instance, a couple of years ago with Boohoo, people were made aware that in Leicester, there are a number of factories where clothes were being produced, where workers there were being paid, I think, about £3.40 an hour. Absolute scandal. The board said we couldn't have known. They should have known. Brewdog, where do I even start with Brewdog? Brewdog, so I think it was last year. So Brewdog has this fantastic reputation. I certainly thought they were a fantastic company. When COVID started, they were doing some brilliant work in terms of supporting communities and sort of redesigning to produce hand gels and things. But what's come out subsequently is a number of staff, former staff, wrote an open letter and kind of went, this is not a good company. A couple of weeks ago, there was a program on disclosures on the BBC, which also raised a huge number of red flags in terms of the company. So I think what I'm trying to stress here is the real need through ESG for accountability, transparency, and openness. So The big question is where to start, because this is a complicated area. It's moving incredibly quickly. You know, even on the regs front, I've spoken to people who are absolute experts on regulations, and even they're really struggling to keep up. So it's really first about understanding what questions to ask, you know, and then moving on to what is the why? What is driving your interest? What are your objectives? And then it's getting down into the nuts and bolts a bit. So it's about understanding what matters for your company. So that's thinking about material considerations. So that's both, that is financial impact, it could be reputational impact, it could be legal impacts. It's then about start collecting the information you have. So it's about establishing a baseline. It's about just starting somewhere, because I know that's where a lot of people are really struggling, you know, effectively where to start. And then once you've developed that baseline, it's very much about review, refine, review. First stab at an approach to ESG is a first stab. The critical thing is to actually get started on it. It can be reviewed, it can be refined over time. And finally, just to talk through some freely available resources. I think it's really important in this space, because I do know I have had conversations with smaller companies where there are real concerns about, you know, this can cost a lot. Developing roadmaps to net zero, for instance, for the big companies, they're putting a lot of cash behind this. So it's thinking about actually what's doable for you and for your company. And that's really it. I really hope that's been helpful. Do feel free to either email, do connect on LinkedIn. And also I set up a group if you have a particular interest in the built environment. I set up a group, ESG and real estate, so on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect up with that. Thanks. Back to you, Chris.
Brilliant, Sophie. Thank you so much for that. I think, and actually, I think you had some environmental challenges of your own at one point. I think there was a bit of choppy signal going on, but you did amazingly. And thanks to everybody for bearing with that. But the slides are excellent, and we didn't really lose you at any point, but we got you back properly at the end as well. So thank you so much for that. The thing I found really fascinating is that there's two or three things. Firstly, I think a lot of these topics they stand alone in their own right, don't they, as well as under the umbrella of ESG. But I think what this does is it provides quite a strong, I guess, glue around everything, and just trying to work out what the important things are. And certainly, as I was listening to you, I was thinking about kind of some, like, clearly there's a commercial aspect, isn't there, to it, that if your ESG agenda is not straight, and you're fishing in certain ponds, then as time passes, you're increasing the risk of not being competitive because of lack of ESG. And I think that's really relevant to lots of people. So it's
both not being competitive as well as, in some areas, it's quite likely in a couple of years it won't be possible to access finance, or there will be significant caveats.
Absolutely. So you're kind of you don't be caught sleeping is the message, isn't it? Yeah. If you're not on this, you might find yourself in trouble. It will overtake you. And then the reputational thing is really interesting as well. We've explored this a little bit before, where unforced errors cause own goals, and I think that's without mixing my sporting metaphors, but I think that's really interesting as well. And every business has a responsibility to protect its reputation. The governance thing is interesting for small businesses as well, because I think small businesses tend to be a little bit more relaxed about governance, which increasingly is not viable. And then we all know, and this is a topic that we've covered quite a bit in these forums, the recruitment market and the retention market for people is really is changing actually, and what employees want in the workplace is changing, and the lens that they're looking at businesses through is changing as well. So they're all really fascinating points, and I think what you've done is you've given us a bit of crystallization of it, and hopefully a way forward. So thank you ever so much for that. What we're going to do now, as you know, because we've talked about this, is we're going to give our participants an opportunity to talk about this in the breakouts, and I know you're going to facilitate one of the breakouts for us, Sophie, so thank you very much for that. So we will see you back later for a bit more of a roundup afterwards. So thank you, Sophie, once more. So let's talk about the breakouts. The idea, everybody who's been on these forums before will understand, we'll do a 20-minute breakout. There will be a facilitator, a Firestarter facilitator in the room who will make themselves known to you. I always make the point, please don't spend 20 minutes doing introductions. That's not the best use of the time. A quick hello, and then get into the meat of the topic. There is a countdown, I think, on the screen. So, but again, the facilitators will try and make sure that the time is well managed, and that everybody gets a voice. What we're doing today is slightly differently. We have identified 6 topics related to this theme, which the facilitators will make known to you as you start your breakout. But the 6 topics are coming up on your screen now. I'm not going to. I'm going to try not to read these. I just know as that words came out of my mouth, I'm going to start reading them. But I'm not going to read them. You can all read. So one of these topics will be the topic in your room. The facilitator will make that known to you. And what we ask is that someone from the room volunteers or is nominated to join the panel afterwards with Dave Harries, just to give a little bit of feedback on what your thoughts were on the topic that you were designated to talk about. So please, facilitators, can I just I will remind you afterwards, but please, once you've identified a person, can you share that with Matt Wheeler so he knows who is who? But you can do that straight after the breakouts because we've got a bit of time. So without further ado, really interesting topic. So please enjoy your breakouts and your specific part of it. So we'll see you in about 20 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good time in your breakout groups, and I imagine you had some pretty interesting conversations, which we are obviously going to find out a little bit about in the next few minutes. So we just need to get organized now. So just a reminder that facilitators from the rooms, if you haven't already communicated to Matt Wheeler about who is going to join Dave's panel, then if you could do that pretty quickly, that would be very helpful. So just to give a little bit of time whilst we do that, we're going to have a couple of updates on a couple of things that are going on. The first one, the good news, I think increasingly we're getting really good input from the people coming to these forums. Since we've been doing these forums, I think some crazy number, like nearly 250 people have been on these forums over the course of the last 2 years. Many people multiple times, which I guess just proves the power of them. And I know there's been lots of business opportunity created and lots of great new relationships, professional relationships created as a result of our forums as well. So next month we're already pretty advanced with what the topic is going to be, and I think everybody is beginning to recognise that there are significant external factors starting to affect costs in businesses, and so we're going to have a little bit of a forum on that topic. So the as expressed there, controlling the cost of doing business, and more specifically looking at some more advanced financial planning things that you can do to organise that, both in terms of external funding, management of investments, those kind of things, as well as productivity improvements, and also some things that you can do that are slightly more tactical to manage cost base in businesses. So the link for next month's forum is on our website. It will be in communications, but it's also in the chat right now. So if you want to come next month, please do. The other major thing that's going on across the United Kingdom at the moment is a programme being run by the United Kingdom government called Help to Grow, which is a 12-month learning programme covering pretty well everything that you would reasonably imagine you need to know in order to run a business. It's a significant programme. Its ticket value to the open market is £7,500, but it is 90% funded by the government. And we, Firestarter, are very excited to have been engaged by Gloucester Business School to deliver a round of these programs in partnership with them. The first one of which starts, I believe, next week actually, or potentially the week after. They're just finalising the absolute start date of it. But if anybody's interested in this, I know there are still some spaces. I think 2 spaces left on this cohort starting next week. And beyond that, I think this program is going to run and run, I believe, for the next 3 years. So I believe it's a genuinely really good thing to get involved with if you are running a business. So more on that as we go through, and certainly we'll be looking to share some case studies of people that have been on that program. So hopefully that little commercial break has given all the people in the background the time they need to get organised. So I thank you. I've had a yes in my ear. So I would like to now introduce our good friend, Mr. Dave Harries, a regular on these forums, who is going to host a no doubt fascinating conversation based on what was talked about in the breakouts. So Dave, over to you, my friend.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, it was a fascinating breakout. The one I had was certainly very good. But I'm going to be joined on the screen now, hopefully by a representative from all of the breakout groups. So let's just hope that happens. Yeah, there it goes. That's good. So thank you guys for joining me. And obviously, I don't know which discussion was discussed in your particular group. So I'm going to start by asking you that. And if I could remind you all to come off mute as well. So let's start top left of my screen, because that seems logical, and it's Paul Spencer. Hello, Paul. Nice to see you again. You're still on mute, Paul. Could you unmute yourself? That would be great.
Apologies, I'm talking away, saying good morning to you and not hearing anything. So I'll say again, good morning, good to be back. Thank you.
No problem. Paul, could you start by just telling us which topic you had in your breakout room?
Yeah, so we had the 3 keywords: diversity, inclusiveness, and equality.
Okay.
So we were discussing those 3 topics.
And so tell me what sort of conclusions you came to. What were the sort of points that were being raised in your room?
Yeah, well, it was interesting. I think we had a good mix in our room. For a start, although this was a question we finished on, where Jack asked us, whether we would prioritise either of the 3. I think we all agreed that all three are equally important to us. So difficult to prioritise on any one of those 3. That they're all very important topics, equally important. I think we had a mix in our room in the sense of we have Nilay, who works in a very kind of in a service environment for a start, also in a startup company. A multinational startup company, but a startup company. And, I work in a much more kind of industrial, B2B, more product-oriented environment. So I think it was quite a nice mix. We covered some of the challenges that we have in those different types of businesses. I mean, from my point of view, that I work for a global business with its headquarters in Germany, but a very decentralized global company, still privately owned, nearly 100 years old, but still privately owned in the original family. So, I feel that we've been able to influence quite a lot at country level when it comes to ESG. And certainly with these 3 topics, I feel like we've got a long way to go still, but we've made good progress over the last 2 or 3 years at country level. I also coordinate activities in the Nordic countries, and we're doing the same in those countries as well. I think, and this is maybe the opposite in some businesses or some corporate big organizations that people work for. I don't see that we're necessarily, so the group business is necessarily working at the same pace as we are at country level, which is good and bad. We've got the autonomy, and we're a dynamic team in the UK. We're not that big. We can influence change. We have done on these topics, mostly through recruitment, also through our own policies and procedures, some of the standards that and accreditations that we have. But that's not necessarily always reflected at country level. So one of the challenges I have is that when we're tendering for a big project, like a government project, for example, where we have product that comes from multiple production facilities, could be Germany, could be China, then we have challenges around demonstrating potentially that we are where we need to be in all of those sites. We might feel confident that we meet those the criteria in 1 or 2 sites. We might not meet it in another 3 or 4, but it all sits within the same supply chain. So that's a challenge.
Yeah. Okay, that's really interesting. Sorry, Paul, I'm cutting across you there. I just want to bring in a couple of other people, but I think what's interesting you say there about almost you're doing it okay in your sort of little cell, as it were, but it's this business of whether it goes across the whole corporation and that sort of thing. So that's very interesting. Next on my screen, I've got Neil. So Neil, what was your first question? What did you discuss in your group? Which of the topics?
Supply chains.
Supply chains, okay. And how and what conclusions did you come to? I mean, what sort of things were brought up in that discussion?
Mainly, we discussed around the whole how the ethical source around the whole supply chain issue. Myself and Jeff and Sophie in the group, and again, it was from different backgrounds. So Jeff from a service background, and myself from more of an installation and product background. So we had a good discussion around that. And certainly from our company point of view, I think the biggest thing for me taking away, speaking to Sophie on it, was how we capture that information and pass it on to our clients in how ethical we are around what we do. So with supply chains issues, as Sophie mentioned, first of all, with Amazon, she's moved away from Amazon because of issues around how their company operates and how they pay people and whatnot. And we had our own issues around solar panels. There's a big human rights issue around a certain manufacturer. So as a company, we're quite hot on that. So we didn't want to deal with that manufacturer. But as Sophie was saying, how do we get that across to our clients to show that we are looking at that kind of thing? Also around the people and the governance, both Jeff and I, with the whole ESG topic, we didn't realise that the people and the governments were under that topic as well. So from a cultural point of view, the people power really over the last couple of years, the staff and people have come to the forefront of a company. We felt with that whole cultural, as a company again, we're quite hot on culture. We want the team to be happy and as a family and lean on each other and that. So it was all around that ethical based.
That's really interesting, Neil. I'm wondering whether that that cultural thing is important as well, because the pressure can go both ways, can't it? Pressure from below, making companies take this stuff seriously. If the people in your company, we talked a lot about recruitment as well in my group, and and how this can help recruitment. But we'll maybe come to that when we get to Alicia. But can I move on to Craig now? Craig, tell me which of the topics you had.
So our question was, what does social value look like for my company in terms of both internal and external impacts, and are there areas for improvement? Which I think we really interpreted as what does the social element of ESG mean to us, I guess. I was on the call with Kirsty, and she's a sole trader, so it's difficult for her to think about a lot of the elements in terms of social applying to her business because she doesn't hire these types of things. but she does work with companies around their culture and aligning it to their brand. So she tends to look at it from a more holistic kind of a perspective. I guess for me, being South African and having a company that employs people in the UK and in South Africa, we have different laws around how people are managed and how people are treated from an employee perspective. Given my history and the history of South Africa, you can imagine you get scrutinized quite a lot from a diversity perspective. I've been held up on calls by business leaders. You know, why is your board pale, male, and stale? And I have to go, well, that's my family. Can't really change that. But you know, we obviously, it's very front of mind for us, especially the diversity piece. We always try and hire in the right way, you know, giving everyone an equal opportunity to come on board, and then obviously looking at the diversity within the people that we hire. The challenge, I guess, is when you're a small business and when you're hiring at a certain level, very often we don't have the time to take people from an area where, you know, where the people that come from that area may not have the skills. It's very hard to hire at a certain level and put people in a particular role. So there are a lot of challenges around that, but we managed to get by, I guess.
Okay, thank Craig. I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm conscious that we haven't got that much time, and I want to get through the other three as well. Virginia, I can't see you, but I'm hoping you're there. You are on mute at the moment as well.
There you are. Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Virginia. What was your topic?
So ours was, how might I reduce greenhouse gas across the business, including supply chains, and how can I measure this?
And
so
what conclusions did you come to?
Conclusions. We came to the conclusion that I think post-COVID, a lot of people have changed the way they work anyway. So people are working from home. They are not traveling so much. So a lot of people are not jumping on planes and trains anymore. So this is all good stuff. Measurement is quite difficult because we're looking at, you know, can you turn down your energy? One way of doing it is to set your goals. So that could be cutting down on waste, increasing the amount of recycling that you do in the office, cutting back any travel that isn't necessary, because I suppose in our industry, sometimes people do want us to go on site. So, you know, even trying to cut that down, persuade them that they don't necessarily need us to be face-to-face in the same room. Finding like-minded suppliers, so people that we actually work with. And another thing that I sort of threw into the mix was I used to work for a financial company who had something called the RIO, which was an ethical overlay filter that would be used to analyse clients' funds and pensions and things like that. So we would actually look at where the money was invested, which companies they were working with, and then write a report. So we'd say, okay, so you've got 50% of your money in BAT. You're not getting our gold seal of approval because that's all unsustainable. It's tobacco, so it's not green, it's unhealthy, it's poisonous. So there could be a sort of cut down version that a company could do with its own suppliers. So you could say, if you're getting a new catering company, and have your own little, you know, thing on the back of a pitch document and say, look, okay, so what is your recycling policy? How much of the stuff that you buy in is recycled? How much recycling do you do? What is your employment policies? What are your supplier criteria? And just grade it and almost give them a little health check and give, you know, you give marks out of 10 and just say, you know, fine from, you know, 1 being they do nothing and everything gets thrown away and they don't try and buy in supplies from nearby or from green suppliers, to, you know, this company's great, they are very ethical looking, they're very green looking, this is somebody we want to be associated with, because you know, you can be tarred by association. You know, if you were buying in supplies from a company that was then found to be completely unethical inside and out, then you don't want to be, you know, associated with them. So it's all about helping encourage other people to be green and you know, environmentally friendly and
Virginia, you know, I'm sorry, Virginia, I'm just going to cut across you there because I'm conscious of time. But thank you very much. That was very interesting, and it's just not all black and white, is it?
No.
Robert, can I come to you next? Quickly tell me which subject you dealt with.
Certainly. We dealt with what might ESG look like in my business and practices, and we discuss that in relation to clients in the supply chain and the wider markets as well. There was a discussion with John and Peter, and interesting for all of us. I mean, it's largely driven, certainly for the SMEs, by the larger organizations and their decisions and real business practices. It was interesting how the challenges between the different, and Peter highlighted how people wear different hats and they need to understand how ESG fits into the wider business sense as well. And the challenge of that when it goes from a heartfelt decision for either marketing or the business ethics through to the actual business operations. And that can be really challenging for a smaller business as opposed to a larger business who might have more resources. And we also highlighted that there's a real need for greater transparency and engagement. And these kind of conversations are great for that because we hear from different people of how they're trying to address this, but there also needs to be a regular, more engaging process where we can learn how people have collaborated or found new ways. One thing that was highlighted as well is that the need of the ethics of a business and how to bring that to the forefront and probably have an easier way of going beyond a pledge, because there's a lot of pledges out there and a lot of people saying, I'm part of this or this kind of recognition, which is great, but we're all making steps in the right direction. But how do we then translate that into decision making for a procurement process or the wider supply chain engagement? And there's a lot going on. I mean, we can probably talk about it for hours more.
Yeah, sorry, Rob. We could talk about this for much longer. I'm sorry to cut you off again, but Alicia, let me quickly come to you because I want to bring Sophie back in a minute as well. So, could you quickly? So, I know I was in your group and we were talking at the headline level. Why is ESG important to me? So, what were the general conclusions, do you think, Alicia?
Well, because I was listening to all of you, and it's really interesting, or somehow it's connected together. If you are working in different companies, or it's just self-employed people, it doesn't matter because it's important. And maybe the headline of it's times are changing, and we have to behave and adapt on these changes. It was not just the COVID times, but also before COVID, we see there were many changes, a lot of genders, for example, and we have to just adapt to it. This is the most important thing. And if it's different companies, self-employed, and so on, just to adapt to this and just to think about it. The times are changing, and we have to behave some differently. And what is maybe the most positive thing, because now we are talking a lot about negative and positive than just with the COVID, but on the other hand, people are more open than before COVID, before 10 years. And this is what is the big positive thing for it. And then we can apply ESG in general in different ways.
Alicia, thank you very much for that. I'm sorry to cut you off again, but let me bring Sophie back in because she's our expert, and I really want to know what she thinks of all these points that are brought up. So, Sophie, and Matt and Chris as well, if you're there, if we can get you all back on the screen. Hi, Sophie. Nice to see you again. Thank you for that brilliant talk. What do you think of that feedback? I mean, what Alicia was just saying, times are changing. That kind of sums it up in a way, doesn't it?
No, I think it's really exciting because there is something about ESG. Actually, a lot of opportunities come with it, particularly where companies are already doing some really good work in terms of the sorts of decisions that they're making. So, for instance, Neil, in terms of choice of suppliers, they're already making those decisions, but it's time to now kind of actually shout about it. But there is also something about looking closely at your own business and own operations and having a really honest view and kind of going, okay, this is where we are. This is what we're good at. This is what we need to do a bit more on. But I mean, my main hope is that sort of people take away some thoughts about at least an initial first step into kind of moving into the territory of ESG.
Yeah. And Chris, from your point of view at Firestarter, I mean, you said at the beginning that, you felt you didn't know much about it. Are you going to change the way you go forward, do you think, as a result?
Very deep question, Dave.
Absolutely. I like to challenge you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, my overriding conclusion from everything I've heard is that lots of people are already doing brilliant things, and I think Alicia did a great job of summarising. You know that like be ready for change. Times are changing. I think there is a greater openness in the world to that. And people are naturally going, like intuitively, naturally going on a journey. For me, the big challenge I feel is as a business owner and a busy business owner, how do you put some rigor into really making this happen whilst you're doing the day job? Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, and ringing in my ears, we had a client many years ago whose kind of mantra was adapt or die. I don't think it's quite adapt or die. But you need to have a bit of a roadmap amongst the busyness of the day to day, how you're going to execute these things in a structured way that pick up all the brilliant points that people have mentioned. So Dave, I'm really conscious of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we probably should call it a day on this bit of the forum. But thank you everybody for joining me. Thank you. Sorry, I had to cut some of you off. I apologise for that. But we've got to hand back to Chris now, who's going to say goodbye. Basically,
tell everybody to go. Yeah. So thank you very much. Interesting. This always happens with these forums. It just proves the topics are good and the content is interesting and people want to talk about them. If we do nothing else, we thought provoke and we just get people pointed in a direction. And hopefully with follow-up materials, we help everybody just take a few steps forward to move on with whatever the topic was, in this case, ESG. On that very point, what I would say is please keep bringing us topics. And if you know interesting people to talk about topics, also please point them in our direction as well. Because great content makes for good, interesting forums, and it can be anything. It can be topics of the day, it can be difficult topics, it can be off-the-wall topics, it can be more training-based topics. As I say, we've got a topic for next month. Please do register for that. Link will be buried in the chat somewhere now, but you will get it subsequently. So all that really remains for me to say is thank you to everybody. We had a good international representation today, which is fantastic, and that's great because we have an increasing community with these forums, and please just do continue to invite people to them. So thank you very much. Thank you, Sophie, in particular, for helping us, Dave, for all your hosting, to the Firestarter marketing team for all the background work to make this possible. And obviously to our technical crew for handling all the intricacies of getting the right people on the screen at the right time. So I wish you all a wonderful Thursday, and we will see you next time. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.